Today we're tackling one of the most rewarding and simultaneously terrifying food sources in the ruined world. Fungi. Mushrooms are everywhere in the wasteland. They're sprouting from collapsed buildings, thriving on abandoned logs, and popping up in places that used to be parking lots. And here's the thing about mushrooms. They're incredibly nutritious. They're packed with protein, vitamins, and minerals. They require no hunting, no chastening, no wrestling with irradiated wildlife. They just sit there waiting to be picked. It sounds perfect, right? Here's the problem. Fungi are also one of the fastest ways to die in the apocalypse that doesn't involve another human being. Some mushrooms will feed you for a week. Others will shut down your liver in 72 hours. A few will make you see colors that don't exist before your kidneys stage a violent protest. And the really fun part, the deadly ones often look almost identical to the edible ones. So today, we're going to learn how to tell the difference. We're going to talk about identification, improvised testing methods, common mistakes, and safety precautions. By the end of this, you'll either be a more confident forager or you'll have decided to stick with canned beans forever. Both are valid outcomes. Let's begin. The first rule of mushroom identification is that there is no single rule. There's no universal trick, no magic shortcut. Anyone who tells you that all poisonous mushrooms have a certain color or a certain shape is either misinformed or actively trying to reduce the survivor population. That said, there are characteristics you can observe that will help you build a profile of what you're looking at. Start with color. Edible mushrooms tend to come in browns, tans, whites, and pale yellows. These are your oyster mushrooms, your puffballs, your chicken of the woods with its distinctive orange and yellow shelves. Bright colors are often a warning sign. Vivid reds, striking yellows, and neon oranges frequently indicate toxicity. The fly, agaric, that classic red cap with white spots, is perhaps the most famous example. It looks like something from a fairy tale because fairy tales were trying to warn you. However, and this is important, color alone means nothing. The destroying angel is pure white. It looks innocent. It looks like something you'd find in a gourmet grocery store. It will also kill you with brutal efficiency. So color is a clue, not an answer. Next, examine the shape. Pay attention to the cap, the stem, and what's underneath: gills, pores, or teeth. Many deadly mushrooms in the Amanita family have a distinctive bulbous base and a ring around the stem called an annulus. If you see a mushroom with a sac-like cup at the base called a vulva, treat it with extreme suspicion. That's a common feature of some of the most lethal species on the planet. Edible boletes have pores underneath instead of gills. They look like tiny sponges. Most boletes are safe, though some will cause stomach upset. Polypores grow on wood in shelf-like formations and often have pores as well. Chicken of the woods and hen of the woods are classic examples. Now, smell. This is where things get interesting. Many edible mushrooms have pleasant, earthy, almost nutty aromas. Some smell like anise or almonds. Chanterelles have a distinctive fruity, apricot-like scent that's hard to mistake once you know it. Dangerous mushrooms often smell wrong. Some have a chemical odor, others smell sickeningly sweet. A few smell like rotting flesh, which is nature's way of saying, please do not eat this. If a mushroom smells like a hospital or a laboratory, put it down and walk away. Finally, texture. Fresh, healthy, edible mushrooms should be firm, but not rock hard. They shouldn't be slimy, unless that's a known characteristic of the species. They shouldn't be falling apart. Decay and insect damage can introduce bacteria and other problems, so even a safe species becomes risky when it's past its prime. The golden rule here is simple. If you cannot identify a mushroom with absolute certainty using multiple characteristics, do not eat it. A maybe is a no, and almost certainly is a no. You need complete confidence, and you need it based on more than one feature. Now, let's talk about testing. In the old world, you could look up any mushroom in a field guide or an app. In the wasteland, you're working with memory, observation, and improvised methods. I want to be very clear about something. No improvised test is 100% reliable. These methods can help you gather additional information, but they are not substitutes for proper identification. Think of them as tools in a larger toolkit, not magic solutions. The first test is the touch reaction test. Take a small piece of the mushroom and press it firmly with your finger or a clean tool, then wait and observe. Some mushrooms bruise dramatically when damaged. Many boletes turn blue when cut or bruised. This is called bluing, and in most cases, it's harmless. The mushroom is oxidizing. However, some toxic mushrooms also blue, so this isn't a safety indicator either way. What you're watching for is unusual reactions. Rapid color changes to red, pink, or black can sometimes indicate toxicity, though not always. The main value of this test is building a profile. It's another data point. The second test involves color change when cooked. If you have fire, which you should, you can heat a tiny piece of the mushroom and observe what happens. Most edible mushrooms darken slightly and release moisture. Some toxic mushrooms change color dramatically, turning pink, red, or green. This isn't universal, but extreme color changes during cooking are a warning sign. The third test is the ammonia sniff test. This requires access to ammonia, which you can find in old cleaning supplies or, if necessary, produce yourself through rather unpleasant biological means. Place a drop of ammonia on the cap of the mushroom and observe. Some toxic mushrooms react with ammonia by changing color, often to yellow, green, or brown. Many amanitas show a yellowish reaction. Again, this isn't foolproof, but it's another piece of the puzzle. The fourth method is the spore print. Cut the cap off the mushroom and place it gill side down on a flat surface. If you have paper, use paper. If not, any smooth, clean surface works. Leave it for several hours, ideally overnight, if conditions allow. The mushroom will drop spores, leaving a print. Different species produce different colored spores: white, cream, pink, brown, purple, black. This helps narrow down identification. Deadly amanitas typically have white spore prints. Many edible species have brown or purple-brown prints. This won't tell you if something is safe, but it can help rule out certain species or confirm others. One final note on testing: never perform a taste test. I know there are old survival guides that recommend putting a tiny piece on your tongue and waiting for reactions. This is bad advice. Some toxins are absorbed through the mouth almost instantly. Others cause no immediate reaction, but destroy your organs over days. Your tongue is not a chemistry lab. Keep unknown mushrooms out of your mouth. Let's talk about errors. Because in the wasteland, learning from other people's mistakes is how you avoid making your own. The most common mistake is false confidence. Someone finds a mushroom that looks like something they remember being edible. They're hungry, they're tired. They convince themselves it must be the safe one. It's not. The destroying angel, which is lethal, can be confused with puffballs, horse mushrooms, and paddy straw mushrooms, all of which are edible. The differences are subtle. They're in the base of the stem, the smell, the spore print, but a hungry person in fading light might not notice those differences until it's too late. Amatoxin poisoning, which comes from destroying angels and death caps, is particularly cruel. You eat the mushroom, it tastes fine, maybe even good. Then nothing happens for 6 to 12 hours. You feel great. You think you made the right call. Then the vomiting starts, diarrhea, severe cramps. But after a day or two, those symptoms fade. You feel better again. You think you've recovered. You haven't. During that quiet period, the toxin is destroying your liver. By the time the symptoms return, often it's too late for the old world's medicine to help. In the wasteland, it's simply a death sentence with extra steps. The second common mistake is trusting folklore tests. If a mushroom turns a silver spoon black, it's poisonous. If it peels easily, it's safe. If insects eat it, humans can too. None of these are true. Insects have different digestive systems. Silver reacts to sulfur compounds, not toxicity. Peeling has nothing to do with edibility. These old tales have killed people for centuries. The third mistake is eating raw mushrooms. Even many safe species contain compounds that cause stomach upset when raw but break down with heat. Always cook your mushrooms. High heat, thorough cooking. This won't neutralize all toxins, but it eliminates some risks and makes safe mushrooms safer. The fourth mistake is foraging in contaminated areas. Mushrooms are bioaccumulators. They absorb heavy metals, radiation, and toxins from their environment with frightening efficiency. A perfectly edible mushroom growing near industrial waste or in heavily irradiated soil becomes poison. Consider where the mushroom is growing, not just what it is. The humorous consequence of many non-lethal mistakes is gastric distress. You'll experience what I politely call aggressive evacuation from both ends. You'll be incapacitated for hours, maybe days. In the apocalypse, Being unable to move or defend yourself because you're dealing with violent mushroom-induced issues is not just embarrassing, it's dangerous. And then there are the hallucinogenic mistakes. Some mushrooms don't kill you, they just temporarily relocate your consciousness to another dimension. You might spend 8 hours convinced that the ruined gas station is actually a castle, and the pack of feral dogs approaching you are friendly ambassadors from a neighboring kingdom. This is rarely helpful for survival. Preparation and precautions separate survivors from statistics. Here's how to handle mushrooms safely. First, gloves. Always use gloves or hand coverings when handling unknown mushrooms. Some species can cause skin irritation. A few can even absorb toxins through the skin. Old rubber gloves, leather scraps, or even plastic bags over your hands work fine. Just create a barrier between your skin and the fungi. Second, collection containers. Never put unknown mushrooms in the same container as mushrooms you've identified as safe. Cross-contamination is real. Spores transfer, juices mingle. Keep separate containers for separate specimens. Third, cloth or mesh for carrying. Unlike plastic, cloth allows mushrooms to breathe and continues dropping spores as you travel, which is actually beneficial for the ecosystem and future foraging in those areas. It also prevents moisture buildup, which accelerates decay. Fourth, water purification. If you're using mushrooms in soups or stews, boil the water thoroughly first. And here's a technique that adds an extra safety margin. Boil your mushrooms in water. Discard that water, then boil them again in fresh water. This won't remove all toxins, but it can reduce concentrations of water-soluble compounds that cause stomach upset. Fifth, keep samples. If you eat a new mushroom species, keep a sample separate. If you become ill, that sample could help someone else identify what poisoned you and potentially help you if treatment is available. Wrap it in cloth, keep it cool, and note where and when you found it. Sixth, the waiting period. After eating any mushroom for the first time, wait at least 24 hours before eating more. Some reactions are delayed. If you're going to get sick, you want to know from a small portion, not a full meal. Seventh, filtering and processing. Some mushrooms that aren't great, eaten whole, become safer when processed. Boiling them and straining the liquid extracts some nutrients while leaving problematic solids behind. Drying mushrooms concentrates them, but can also reduce moisture-dependent toxins. However, drying does not make a poisonous mushroom safe. It just makes a slightly risky mushroom slightly less risky. When you find an unfamiliar mushroom, treat it like an experiment. Observe, document, test. Never rush to consumption. Start with the bruise test. Cut or crush a small piece and watch it over the next 15 to 30 minutes. Note any color changes. A mushroom that instantly turns bright blue, then fades to black, is giving you very different information than one that slowly browns like an apple. Smell tests should be conducted with caution. Don't shove your nose directly into the specimen, waft the air toward you. Some mushrooms release spores or irritants that you don't want in your respiratory system. The smell might be pleasant and earthy, it might be faintly sweet. It might smell like you've opened a cabinet of old industrial chemicals. Trust your instincts on that last one. Observe the spore release. If conditions are humid, you might actually see spores drifting from the gills in clouds. Tapping the mushroom can release these spore clouds. Different colors of spore clouds under different lighting can help with identification. White and cream spore dust looks very different from dark purple-brown spores. Watch how the mushroom ages. Over hours, safe mushrooms typically just dry out or slowly decay. Some toxic mushrooms undergo dramatic changes, becoming slimy, changing color significantly, or developing unusual odors. Aging is information. Document everything mentally, or, if you have writing materials, physically. The more observations you make before consumption, the better your decision-making becomes. And finally, the isolation test. If you're in a group and someone wants to try an unverified mushroom, only one person tries it, a small amount, everyone else waits. This sounds harsh, but it's practical. If the tester becomes ill, the others can care for them. If the entire group eats the same bad mushroom, everyone is incapacitated simultaneously. Redundancy saves lives. Let me give you some final rules to live by. Literally, never eat a mushroom based on a single identifying characteristic. Deadly mushrooms can have pleasant smells. Edible mushrooms can have off-putting appearances. You need multiple confirmations: shape, color, smell, texture, habitat, spore print, and if possible, comparison to known specimens. Learn a small number of species extremely well rather than many species poorly. If you know 3 or 4 safe mushrooms with absolute certainty, you're better off than someone who sort of recognizes 30. Master the chicken of the woods, the puffball, the oyster mushroom, the morel. Know their habitats, their seasons, their look. Deep knowledge of a few species is worth more than shallow knowledge of many. When in doubt, don't. This cannot be overstated. If any part of your identification feels uncertain, walk away. There will be other mushrooms. There will be other food sources. There will not be another liver if yours fails. Avoid the amanitas entirely. Just write off that whole family. Yes, some amanitas are edible, but the family also contains the death cap and the destroying angel, 2 of the most lethal organisms you'll encounter. The margin for error is too small. Let someone else take that risk. Grow your own if possible. Mushroom cultivation is actually feasible in the wasteland. Oyster mushrooms grow on almost any dead wood or cardboard. Wine-capped mushrooms thrive in wood chips. If you can establish a cultivation area, you've eliminated identification risk entirely. You know exactly what you're growing because you started the process. Finally, cross-reference everything. Talk to other survivors. Compare notes. If someone in your community has expertise, learn from them. Knowledge sharing is survival. We've covered a lot of ground today: identification methods, improvised testing, common errors, safety protocols, experimentation techniques, practical survival rules. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. Fungi are a friend if you know them. They're abundant, nutritious, and require no hunting or agriculture. A skilled forager can feed themselves and others with what the ruined world provides. But fungi are a foe if you don't. A single mistake can mean days of illness, permanent organ damage, or death. There is no room for guesswork. There is no space for overconfidence. Study carefully. Learn the species that grow in your region. Practice identification on specimens you won't eat until you're certain. Build your knowledge base methodically and cautiously. Laugh often, because honestly, the alternative is despair. The apocalypse is absurd. Finding yourself elbow deep in mushroom experiments while the world crumbles around you is absurd. Humor keeps you sane. Humor keeps you human. And survive always. That's the goal. Not just today, but tomorrow and the day after. Every meal that doesn't kill you is a victory. Every correct identification is a skill reinforced. Every day you're still breathing is a day you've won. Fungi are everywhere in the wasteland. Now you know how to make them work for you instead of against you. Stay careful, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.